We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us on this Wednesday, talking about this current legislative session just getting underway. And our guest with us this morning, this is their beat. It's their gig. News Channel 5 legislative reporter Chris Conte. He's over there, looking dapper with a narrow tie. We also have Joel Ebert, not related to Roger Ebert, though he is from Chicago originally, right? He's like a Tennessean. And Carrie Wade Gervin, not related to George Gervin of San Antonio Spurs fame from years ago, but she is a Nashville scene reporter joining us today.
Are you sure you're not a politician?
I'm not a
spin these things off.
I'm nonsensical is what I am. I'm sorry. Anyway, thank you guys for coming on this morning. I know it's about to get real busy for you. Listen, let's take a call from Brian. We never really know where Brian's going. Okay, he's a wild card. But let's see what Brian thinks. Brian, good morning.
Good morning in Sessionville.
Yes, indeed, Brian. How are you?
Pretty good.
What can we do?
Yeah, you know, I work for Nashville Retrospect, and I was talking to it's a historical site. It's the Clements Railroad Museum. I guess I can say it. And I think that the guy who built the Clement Railroad House there in Dixon was a distant relative of the old Governor Clements. And I was talking to a guy. He's, we do a little business with him. And I was talking to Andy, and then he said that, well, I called him the other day, and he wasn't in. And the lady said, oh, well, he's at the legislative session that's coming in. I was like, oh, he's in a legislature? And she said, no, he's a lobbyist. I was like, oh. So I guess all the lobbyists are going to start come flocking in here pretty quick. And the guy from Chicago, I spent 10 years in Chicago, and he was on the nightly political thing one night, and we were talking about how Nashville is very unique in that most state capitals are in small towns or small cities away from the largest city of the state. It's sort of, I don't know if it was a forethought. Our founding fathers had such great forethought, but I don't know if it was a balance of power thing, but and Nashville is pretty unique. And that one thing I see happening is that sometimes, Nashville is pretty liberal, and they'll try to flex their muscles. A lot of their mayors turn into governors, and that's why I'm watching Howard Dean. But I was thinking, I don't know how to describe this, but Nashville will flex their muscles a little bit, and the state legislature will smack them down, and then the city will flex their muscles a little bit, and then the state legislature will smack them down. But we got to watch some lobbyists too.
All right, as he goes on, Carl Dean, of course, the former mayor, not Howard Dean, but
we're going to Mexico.
Yeah, right.
New Hampshire.
Right.
Tennessee.
All right, to talk a little bit about lobbyists, first of all, not all lobbyists are bad, even though sometimes the public may have some perception along those lines. And do you find yourself dealing a lot with lobbyists as you cover things there, as much maybe as you do sometimes with some of the lawmakers, or no?
Not as much as dealing with the lawmakers, but as far as finding out who's pushing specific legislation, what their reasoning is behind it, the lobbyists are a valuable resource as far as knowing, where the muscle is behind different bills.
Yeah, and is it pretty obvious to you, too, and I know some of the names, but who the very powerful lobbyists are?
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear.
The ones who can pretty much get an audience with anyone they want for good reason, and others maybe not as much influence, right?
Yeah, and I think, to Carrie's point, a lot of times you'll see a bill just go nowhere in a committee, and you think, what happened? And you go to the lobbyist, and they'll have the backstory on it. So it's it's good to be able to have people that aren't just the lawmakers who just generally tend to play it. Oh yeah, it just didn't have the support. Well, what does that mean? The lobbyists will tell you the real answer behind what that was.
And is it are they talking to you off the record when they do that?
A lot
Sometimes
of times
they prefer to say, look, I'll give you the backstory, but please don't attribute this, or maybe this is just on background.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they don't want anything to do with stories.
That's true.
Sometimes I remember last year when Mike Stewart brought that assault rifle up to one of the committee meetings to talk about how he was able to buy it and was trying to push some legislation about online sales and guns. And there was an NRA lobbyist around. She wanted nothing to do with anyone. talking
Okay.
about, asking about some of his points that he had brought up with, some of this
Sure.
legislation that he had drafted.
And for their rationale is, if I'm in the story or in the headlines, then I can't really have a frank conversation with a lawmaker. Then
makes sense.
they think that they're going to expose them in some sort of way. So it makes sense that they don't want to be on the record. It can be frustrating, though.
Oh, that's what I would say. It would be, because really, when I follow it and cover or read the stories you guys, you don't hear much from lobbyists in stories very often. I don't see it.
But there's lobbyists for pretty much everything. I mean, there are
Sometimes
lobbyists.
there's
There are
like-
lobbyists probably working. They're usually working on journalists' behalf.
Sure,
At the
sure.
federal level,
Right.
trying to keep some of our rights, and so I mean, it's people don't usually think about it, but pretty much every group you could think of has a lobbyist somewhere in some kind of capacity working
Yeah.
for them.
And it's true, too, isn't it, with lobbyists, as you get to see it firsthand, that they do provide a service, okay? I suppose if I were a lawmaker, I mean, a lobbyist comes into me, and usually there's going to be lobbyists on both sides, perhaps, of an issue, and they're going to come in, and they'll be the ones with all the information. Now, as a lawmaker, I guess I'd want to hear from both sides as much as I could, but they're providing you with stuff, but you're always aware of what slant maybe a certain lobbyist has one way or the other, and you take that with a grain of salt.
And people kind of look at lobbyists as, these dirty folks, but a lot of them are former colleagues of the lawmakers
Sure.
there. I mean, there are a lot of, Ryan Haynes, who is the former chairman of the Tennessee Republican Party, he's now a lobbyist. So he's up there. He was also a lawmaker at one point. So he can approach these people as a former colleague, as opposed to, this guy in the corner that you think is like this greasy, character.
Yeah, I mean, being a lobbyist, too, can be very lucrative. They make a lot of money, some of the
More
top
than us.
ones. Oh, yeah, more than us. Yeah, but I'm not sure. You guys may not know this. Is there a grace period when you leave the legislature, how long it is before you can become a lobbyist?
There's
Is it-
1 year.
Is it 1 year? That's what I figured. But then think of all the connections and everything along those lines that come into play. I know many of our viewers are maybe wondering, just what do you think will be some of the top issues at the agenda, this legislative session? And we've talked about some in some news stories, but maybe your thoughts of what you see coming down the pike as maybe being some of the main issues, or maybe some of the most contentious ones. What do you think?
One of the biggest issues is going to be Governor Haslam's push to raise the gas tax and the
we've been
diesel
hearing about
tax to fund a backlog of transportation infrastructure projects. And a lot, there's support among a number of lawmakers, but a number of other lawmakers are saying we have a $900 million surplus in the budget.
Right.
Why do we need to raise taxes? Or if we're going to raise taxes, then we're going to cut taxes somewhere else along the line. And so that is going to be a big debate.
Now, when you look at that, so what is the motivation behind that then? I mean, from Haslam, as far as you guys can tell, as you've covered that story, I mean, there is the surplus, and then talking about increasing a tax, which, obviously voters don't like that, but I mean, what's really behind that?
Well, I mean, I think the issue is, why not now, right? If you're the governor and you've got a budget surplus and you've got 2 years left in your term, this is his effort to show some leadership on an issue that is pretty controversial. You're not in an election year, which is better for everybody to get a little bit of coverage.
Sure.
But also, this problem's not going to go away. If you don't do it now, it's just going to be an issue that's kicked down the road 2 years from now, 5 years from now. So I think his point is, we're in a good economic situation right now.
Okay.
Why would we raise the gas tax when we are not in a good economic situation? So
I see. That makes sense.
I think what the plan right now, and I've been trying to get it out of the governor's office, they want to introduce it formally before the State of the State, which is scheduled for the end of the month. Okay. I would anticipate some sort of press conference from the governor, either late this week or sometime next week.
Okay, and again, the revenues from the gas tax all go to roads?
They all go to TDOT.
TDOT. I mean, that's, for years, wasn't that what is kind of the running joke? I mean, our education sometimes sucks, but we've got the best roads. I mean, you ever drive from Tennessee and, it's smooth as silk, then you get to Alabama and there's potholes everywhere? I mean, we have great roads, right? And so this is just more filling the coffers for our roads again?
Well, I think a lot of lawmakers are saying we had great roads.
Okay, they're still pretty good.
They need, but the biggest thing I think he's going to struggle with is this Republican-led legislature does not like putting anything forward that is not already paid for or has a plan to be paid for. They don't want to do anything in debt. So that is, I guess, his biggest push for this is because they don't want to just go. He knows that they're not going to want to just go spending money on roads and infrastructure and bridges that aren't already paid for or are going to be paid for in some fashion, because it's not something that they want to do, because they pride themselves on kind of this fiscal rating that they have.
And it's important to note that the gas tax has not been increased in almost 30 years.
Okay, that's the point.
And one aspect of the plan reportedly from Haslam would index the gas tax to inflation, so that going forward in the future, the tax would raise or lower automatically, so they would never have to do this again.
I see. Okay.
But again, that's just that has not been confirmed to be in the plan, but it's kind of thought to be part of it.
Part of the negotiation between Haslam and the General Assembly has been, hey, if you're going to raise the gas tax, we want to lower another tax, and that might be the grocery tax, that might be the franchise tax, just so they can sort of sell this to their district back home. Because I think a lot of people view this as a Middle Tennessee problem. That Middle Tennessee really needs this for its infrastructure needs. And the rest of the state doesn't. And I think the governor's office would argue, no, the entire state needs this. Everybody in the state will travel on the state's roads, even if they don't live in Middle Tennessee.
Right. Just in terms of reaching an agreement on that issue or any other, like you said, this is all a Republican legislature. Being a Democrat up there, I mean, it must be like banging your head on a wall. But how much, I mean, you would think, and I remember, when they really got it to the point where it is now, I thought, boy, they can do anything they want. But how much just infighting is there among the Republicans where they fight each other?
There's a lot in the House.
That's what's amazing. They could do anything they wanted if they were on the same page. But they're not. It's almost like there's not a big Democratic contingent, but you've got splits among the Republican Party.
Yeah, you have, this group, the kind of the far right Tea Party contingent, and then you have kind of some more moderate Republicans, like say Beth Harwell, who represents Nashville. So it's she has Democrats in her district and is not going to go as far to the right as some of these rural Republicans that last year wanted to make the Bible a state book, that pushed for the bathroom bill, that all of these kind of social issues that get people riled up.
Right. Here's some of those. We should talk about some of those. Let's take a break when we come back. About that, I also want to ask you about medical marijuana. I think it's a good idea. All right? Why the heck not? All right, we'll take a break. We'll see what you think as well.
If you'd like to
join us. Yeah, maybe so. Look, I'm not going to be smoking it, but man, if it helps someone, and it's way better than opioids, okay? Don't even call and try to tell me that opioids are safer than marijuana, because you're wrong. All right, the number 737-7587. We'll be back with your calls right after this.